All right, what we're going to start with today is where we're living today in the 21st century. And for the most part, intuition is pretty useless without a purpose behind it. So most of the type of thing that we are looking at with intuition, everyone should develop their intuition and use it. But if you don't know what your life purpose is, developing your intuition is pretty much a waste of time. So you'll end up being very psychic and very tuned into everything and scattered out of your mind. So the more you know what your purpose is and what you can focus on and focus your intuition on, the more inclined you're going to be able to use it. And once again, I'm not doing these programs to teach people how to become professional psychics. Some people do have the chops and will become professional psychics. Some people will use it in their counseling practices. Some people will use it in their life coaching practices. Some people will use it in their healing practices. But I think the most important thing you can do is find out what you're here to use your intuition for. The primary focus of developing intuition is your own soul development. It's not this woo-woo psychic stuff from the 70s and the 60s anymore. This is something that you're here to really develop for your own soul development so you can have a dialogue with God, and this is what you're here to do. As far as working with the karma, the old karmic patterns, they are fading. And a lot of the karmic patterns from the past experiences, a lot of you have lived long enough to overcome. You may have already had some lessons in your life. You may have lived long enough at this point in the 21st century to have overcome some of your karmic patterns. Therefore, the only way you're going to know what the next direction for your life is going to be is by tuning into your higher consciousness, to your soul consciousness, to God consciousness. That's probably the easiest way of doing that. As far as the shortest term, and I did talk about this last night a little bit, the more we rely on karma to guide our futures. Prophecy is easy if people always do the same old thing. And so if people stay in the same old patterns and always do what they've always done, prophecy is a piece of cake. You just have to know who you're dealing with. And pretty much everybody could learn who they were dealing with. In the situation where you no longer have those patterns, or you break through the patterns, or you overcome some of these patterns, the more likely you're going to be able to work into a situation where you're able to tune into the greater possibilities. And once again, Friday night, I think Kevin Ryerson really referred to that as sort of being in that flow of consciousness where things flow to you. And once again, survival isn't really an issue. Survival isn't really a problem. I know for some of us, we're still working on paying the bills and survival. But the more we move into that 21st century energy, the more inclined we're going to be able to work with that higher consciousness and be able to create what we need more often. And once again, this is a soul group of humans who've lived through a lot of experiences where they've already had a lot of karmic experiences. They've already been on the down end of the fence a few times. You've already had your butt kicked someplace in some other lifetimes. You've already been married to some guy that was a dictator, or you've already been married to some woman that was a nightmare. You've already lived these experiences. And most souls with life, with that kind of experience, learn from it, realize they don't want to start abusing their power when they become powerful, and they don't do it. They just go on and fulfill their purpose. So for the most part, we're not looking at creating, they very often say people who are abused become abusers. That's just the low end of the cycle. That's the low end of the cycle. The higher end of the cycle are people who overcome. And so if you were in a bad situation in your life, or in a bad marriage, or a bad relationship with your parents, or a bad experience with your boss, or whatever happens to people, stuff happens all the time. I mean, I couldn't even make up what people tell me in readings, what I find out from people. I couldn't even make it up. I wouldn't even believe it would happen, what I've heard in some of these readings. And once people have been down, or once they've been victimized, or once they've been trapped, or once they've been through suffering, they usually don't want to go back. They usually don't want to go back and say, oh, let's go experience more suffering. Let's be broke again for another 10 years. Let's marry another control freak. That's a good idea. So they don't want to go back. And so that's what the 21st century is really about, is this breaking out of these old patterns and beginning to find a way to not go back to dysfunctional things that kept us trapped. Like I said, the Piscean age, and I'll talk about the Piscean age for a moment. This is just a momentary thing, but actually, I think it's -4. Jesus was born in -4 before Common Era, technically, according to, I think, Casey stuff. And the Piscean age, and I'll say the ages prior to the Piscean age. And those of you who saw Tom Baker and I teach this is going to be a little repetitive. But this is basically a program where we're going to talk about the Piscean age, and I'm going to talk about the Aquarian age over here. And this is where we are, is the Aquarian age. When I started teaching this stuff 10 years ago, we were in the Piscean age. The Piscean age patterns And once again, I referred to last night as you all were born in the Piscean age, you're all going to die at some point in the 21st century in the Aquarian age. So you're a very unique soul group. The ones being born today, or my son who's 4 years old who was born in 2003, is not part of this soul group. They have a different soul group, they have a different identity. The people who were born in the Piscean age said, I'm going to be born, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to work with some really, really, everything I didn't finish up in the Piscean age, I'm going to take on in this life. And I'm going to give myself a few lessons. I'll be born to these particular parents. I'll be born in Milwaukee. I don't even like Milwaukee. I'll have my uncle. I like him, but I don't like my aunt. I'll be poor. And people said, okay, let's take on these patterns. And then they really basically took on a lot of unfinished patterns from the Piscean age. And they could also be from prior ages. I won't say it was just from the Piscean age. It was also probably from ages prior to the Piscean age. But if there's patterns where you were victimized and you always have the belief that you were victimized, or you were depressed and you feel like you're never going to get what you want from your life, all those kinds of patterns are really about the Piscean age facing it and overcoming it. And I'll tell you how we overcame it. In 1945, I consider this the death of the beginning of the end of the Piscean age. This is when Casey died. This is when his wife died. This is where the atomic bomb was used. This is the end of World War II. That's the beginning of the end of the Piscean age. Why? Casey was considered a psychic. He was born in the 1800s. I forget what year, but he was born in the 1800s. And he was really a really unusual guy for his age, and why poor guy was born in the South and then moved even further south. And obviously a karmic move, not necessarily if he was in Boston, things may have been different. But he ended up with a situation where he established this foundation. He did reading after reading after reading after reading. He was a real workhorse of a psychic. He did a lot of great work. His work is very, very good. And a lot of the stuff that he did, he was one of the only of his type out there. There was a handful. There was, in the 1800s, I think there was the early 20th century, there was a woman named Mrs. Leonard. I wrote a paper on her at Atlantic University class, and she was a medium. There was a handful, just a couple of psychics here and there, not many. Casey was probably so sought after, not just because he was talented, but people knew that he had answers, and people were willing to sometimes come forward and quietly get a reading. Even today, people whose relatives got readings, the relatives don't want to admit that they got readings from Casey. They don't all want to do that. So in the case, and I read Sidney Kirkpatrick's book on Casey. It's a very, very good biography. There is the River, the first one. Sidney wrote a second one. So here we have 1945 as the death of the Piscean age. That was really the beginning of the end, because Casey died. That was the year he died, and that was what happened to him. But after 1945, start looking how fast time went. Look at how fast the eras went. This is the 1950s. We ended up with TV. 60s, we had the Kennedy era at the beginning, and then we had the flower power era at the end. 70s, people started getting into therapy. And then therapy started being on TV. And there was some good TV back then. If you look at Phil Donahue, and some of the guys like Phil Donahue started bringing subjects out and saying, hey, this person's gay and they can't help it. Hey, this person's a prejudiced bigot. We should talk about this. And they started talking about things. And so we got the 60s, the 70s, and then the 80s came along, and there was that 1987 harmonic convergence that some of us little hippies were waiting for something to happen. And nothing did, really, except energetically. And that's when I said last night the readings changed. That's when I said the readings went from one person with one problem that we could have a fabulous time, do an hour, and be done. And they go on their way and have a happy life. After this, people started having multiple things happen all at the same time. And I won't say life hasn't been crisis-oriented before. We did have World War II. We did have the Holocaust. We did have, humans have always had disasters. All right, they've always had problems. They've always had something going on that was ridiculous or difficult. But the harmonic convergence made the individual life much more of a focus. And what they did is they gave us the tools to start fixing things in our lives. How did they give us that? They did give us radio and TV. Radio existed in the 40s, and then TV, and then therapy became available, and then the computers became available. So this is the information age, the age of information. It's almost too much information right now. But the age of information came around, and if there was a problem that you had, you could find a support group, a therapist, a book, an article, somebody with a website. You could find something on it, whether it's bedwetting, alcoholism, you name it. There is not a problem you can have. There is absolutely nothing private anymore. There's nothing bizarre anymore. You cannot have a bizarre, if you have a bizarre problem, you're now unique, and you'll probably end up famous from it. There's nothing you can't do now that can't be solved. And there are solid ways of solving problems. There are therapists. We do have people who can help you. We do have books about it. We do have websites. We do have support groups. There isn't a problem. My mother was born in 1924. Her mother died in 1937. And so when her mother died, basically the church, this is New England, this is Boston, they were, the family didn't talk about it. They didn't, the mother died in the house, and I guess they didn't tell the kids that night or anything. And it was one of those, superstitious realities. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. It happened in your families too, probably. They just said, well, we're just going to go on now. And when my aunt asked about what about her mother, they said, well, now the Virgin Mary is your mother. And for those of us raised Catholic, that's a nice concept. It's really nice, but it doesn't really explain what happened to Mom. So that's one of the things that now we have gone through decades to try to correct this. We've gone through decades. We've got AA. We've got Narc Anonymous. We got every possible support group in therapy. We've got grief support groups. We have support groups for kids whose parents have been killed, parents whose kids have been killed. We've got everything now. So there is no problem in society you can't solve. But if you were born in 1924 and you're in your 80s now, you will remember it. If you're in your 70s or 60s, you will remember some of this stuff that was going to be submerged. And some families today will still work really hard to submerge stuff. The society's worked really hard to bring it out. And some families still work really hard to put it under that carpet. It's going to be hard to keep it under the carpet now. So that's what's going on in this sort of timeline. We've actually come in, brought out all of our issues, whether it's codependency, alcoholism, you name it. There's been a book written on it. There is nothing you've experienced that somebody probably didn't write a book on somewhere. Somebody did. And so that's what's going on here, is that there's been tremendous progress in the human race as far as being able to get some kind of help to solve your problems, self-awareness. Now, all this in the 60s and 70s was really more, I'd say, psychological. I'd say as we move into the 90s, problems started really compounding on people. And as the Piscean age started really dying, as the Piscean age was really coming to, it's really been coming to a close now, it really started every problem that you have not solved in other lifetimes, or that you said, gee, I've got the tools and the resources to be born in 1956 in this lifetime, and I'm going to have to deal with my mom this time. I'm going to have to face her. Or I'm going to have to deal with Dad, and I have to face his stuff. Or I'm going to have to deal with my own stuff. So whatever it is, whatever your background is, and it's probably all of the above. It's not just one thing anymore. It's not just one person's fault. And in the end, it's not anybody's fault. It comes down to these are lessons that your soul agreed to. And like I said, this soul group I find to be in a very unique position, because you were born in the Piscean age, and you said, I'm going to bring all this forward, and I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to consciously change it. And when I change it, I'm going to become aware of what I've changed. I'm going to work on this. And the reason this is important, intuition isn't about psychic weirdness anymore. Okay? Intuition is something every human should be working with. It's part of your birthright. It's part of what your soul, you are all souls and bodies. And one of my favorite lines is basically, if you have a pulse, if you're here in a physical body, you are a soul inhabiting a body right now. And if you are a soul inhabiting a body, then you have a pulse. You're functioning right now, then you have the right to tap into your intuition. Matter of fact, you have the duty to tap into your intuition. That's what this ends up being. So I'm really done teaching psychic development as this weird psychic thing that's unusual. When Casey was alive, it was unusual. When I started getting into classes, it still was a little unusual. It's not unusual anymore. There's mediums on TV. I just saw this Lisa Williams on Lifetime. She's really pretty good. I liked her. I thought she was nice and down to earth, real compassionate, and that's really the signatures of a pretty good intuitive. She's a medium, but she, this stuff is coming out into the forefront, and there still will always be people who don't like it. That's just the way it's going to be. There's always going to be people who think it's weird or odd or strange, or you may have relatives who think you're whacked for being here. So what? But it's just another thing you do, just like learning kayaking. Okay? It's just another thing you do. So it's not as athletic as learning kayaking. But this is what these patterns are about. So now, what year are we in? We're in 2007. And we're really looking at having overcome, many people, and I will say many people in these lives, have really overcome things. In the readings I've been doing, there's always people with problems, and we all always go through pockets of issues that come up and sort of get us, and we have to deal with them. And it happens. We peel off layers, and we go through life, and then we peel off a few more, and then we peel off a few more. And I think the more you do tune into intuition, very often tune into your soul consciousness, the easier it gets to cope with some of those problems. I think the coping part gets a little bit easier. Okay, we're gonna do 2 exercises, and I did say last night we're going to do these exercises without a partner. We did the partner exercise last night, partly because it was important to wake you up, and it was also important to get you focused on something other than like if you were doing it for yourself. I don't think you guys had the energy to love yourself enough to tap into it last night. You guys were just wiped. So I think today, I think you haven't had enough rest. All these exercises will be about your purpose, about your past life, and will be about you, what you're here to do with your intuition. It's going to be about you this time. And I think that that's important because that gives you a place to work with your intuition. Some people probably will become professionals at some points. There are people, this is going to become a more normal job. This is not going to be a strange, odd job in America anymore. This is a pretty, you would be surprised at people who I see now. I see doctors, I see lawyers, I see military people. I mean, people won't tell their other friends that they're coming to see me, but I have seen them. All right, let me just tell you, through a show of hands, did anybody have any additional insights, or did people get some insights last night, or feel like you got some additional insights maybe over the night about what you were picking up on? See, what happens is, you can raise your hands and stuff. All right, what happens is once you tap into it, you kind of open it up and it starts working. It's like exercise. You know how they say you burn calories for a couple hours after you've been exercising? It's the same thing with psychic stuff. So for the next week, you guys have done a whole weekend. Next couple weeks through Thanksgiving, you guys will probably be pretty tapped in. And if you continue to meditate or do some prayer work or do some contemplation work or do some of that kind of thing, I think you'll find that you're going to be able to tap into this stuff much more easily. I also had some people ask about There are those of us who are not terribly visual. I don't see dead guys. I said last night, I see sparks of light, and I see little balls of light, and I've got clients who are photographing orbs everywhere. So the orbs are popping out in film and everything now, even digital. So that's been, there are these energies around us, and there's always going to be these energies around us. So you may find that you start to see things. But when I do the exercise, I will consciously try to remember to say, you see a staircase in front of you. I will also ask you to feel the staircase or know that the staircase is there or hear the information rather than always see it. The tendency for me is to say see. See the staircase, see the angel, see the book. If you don't see, I just want to just cover you on this and say, just know that there's a book there. And in your mind's eye, just know, okay, there's a book there. And what does it say? You don't have to look at the book to see it if you're not a visual person. You can say, oh, it says, to thine own self be true. And you can just know it. So I'm going to give you a little bit broader latitude on how to tune into this because some people in here are going to be very visual, and some people are going to be auditory, and some people are going to be clairsentience, feelers, and some people are going to be knowers. And most of us are a combination of at least 2 of those. So that's how that usually works. In the Casey readings, I want to just read this. This is a reading from 440-4. This is about, and this is what spiritual guidance is, and this is what I just want to get you guys clear on what you're really doing. This is not just doing readings for other people. It can be helpful to other people. But this is, the question that was asked on 440-4 was, what is the highest possible psychic realization? And the answer that Casey gave, that Jesus gave, okay, Jesus may have been in the room, but he didn't say this. Casey said this, that God the Father speaks directly to the sons of men, even as he has promised. So you can get information directly from God. That's why I said when you have an intention, let's just go straight to God. Way easier, straight to, yeah, you can talk to your dead grandma, sure, she was nice. And she can give you the cookie recipe, but I don't know if she knows anything about the stuff you might want to be asking about. And there may be certain things you want grandma to know about your life. Okay, so the highest possible psychic realization is that God the Father speaks directly to the sons of men, even as he has promised. All right, so I just want you clear on what you're talking about. Let's talk about levels of consciousness, shall we? Is anybody surprised that they did a reading? Raise your hands. Is anybody surprised that they actually got something? You really are surprised? Can I just tell you, everybody can do this? I taught a bunch of theater people to do it in 1987, and they did really, really well. So I just want you to, if your intention is to do it, you will be able to do it, but it's just a matter of suspending your disbelief for a while and doing it. It's just like acting. People can get in there and do a play. I can direct somebody. I was a good director. I could direct people to pretty much do any part, any way, any time. I could tell them exactly how to move, exactly how to say a line, exactly where to move if I have to. But for the most part, anybody can be made to look good if they had a good director. You guys can do this because your souls are designed to do this. You're designed to do this. This is part of who you are. All right, let's look at levels of consciousness, shall we? And Kathy Baker is sitting over here on the side. Where are you at? There you are. Kathy Baker is going to sound really, really repetitive to you because Kathy actually wrote up this information 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Kathy actually, my tapes are really annoying to listen to. I can't stand them. And if I have to listen to my tape, I just can't stand it. And Kathy had to listen to my tapes when I had done some readings on these levels of consciousness, and she transcribed them word for word, which was such a brave and amazing thing that you did. So this is going to be old hat for you. And I'll try to slow down so it doesn't sound so annoying this time. I couldn't have done it. I just couldn't have done it. I couldn't stand it. All right. Let's look at the levels of consciousness as we've been living them. Okay, Aquarian. And I'll tell you, I think, where all this is going. And this is the area of the soul. And it's taken me a long time to understand this. I really couldn't work with this stuff for a while. I had to leave it alone for a while because it was just too much. Sometimes when I know I don't have a whole concept, I just leave it alone for a while. And if I leave it alone for a while, I sort of start to get it, and I usually get it through readings. Usually through working with other people is how I end up getting it. These are the three areas of consciousness I think we're working at. I think for a long time the human race, and I mean not just the Piscean age, but probably prior to the Piscean age, the human race has excelled in being in the I consciousness. And I do think that we had to develop identity. So I'm not saying identity isn't important. I think we had to develop it. But I think that the I consciousness has been really strong in the Piscean age. And I do think some souls agreed to come in, and I've met a bunch of you, and you guys agreed to come in and said, all right, I'll be a real pacifist in this lifetime. I'm going to be a real healer. I'm going to learn about God. I'm going to learn about healing. I'm going to be in the monasteries. I'm going to spend a bunch of different lifetimes exploring God. Or I'm going to spend a bunch of lifetimes exploring love. Or I'm going to spend a bunch of lifetimes exploring making peace with other people, healing people, helping the world somehow. And then a bunch of other souls said, hot dog, these guys are just wimps. Let's go in there and let's do what we want. Earth is open again, free for all, let's go have a good time. And some people there are people who learned how to be good leaders. There are people who learn to use their authority responsibly. But if you look around, there's a whole bunch of people that didn't spend a lot of time in that whole diplomacy thing. They just said, Constitution, let's suspend it. We don't need it. They said stuff like, let's kill those people. They don't agree with us. You're out of here. And so some of the soul groups that were more peaceful very often came under the foot of these other soul groups that were more powerful. I usually call it soul groups that have to do with power and misuse of power, sometimes misusing power, and then ones that have to do with love. There are also balanced power soul groups who actually learn to use their power and their authority responsibly and become good leaders and become good stewards of peace and balance and that sort of thing. But there's the ones that get the headlines, the ones that end up on CNN, are the ones that have just gone crazy with their power. And then the ones that have been peaceful and the ones who came in and said, I'm going to learn about love. I'm going to learn about God. I'm going to learn how to heal people. I want to be a steward of God's energy in the world. They got their butts kicked for a lot of years. A lot of years they had to run into these powerful soul groups. And on Earth, if you notice, the history of Earth is basically a clashing of some of these two energies. And what we're finding in the Piscean age, which is, I'll say was from the time of Jesus through now, and prior to the Piscean age, we're really looking at times where we are now allowed to become aware of our consciousness and change the positions. But if you are a powerless person and you knew you were victimized, say when you were 10 years old because something happened to you, the whole deal is to not get into a situation where you misuse your power. Because if you do, you just become part of the problem. You don't fix anything. That's, once again, why we have therapists. That's why there's spiritual psychology. That's why there's transpersonal psychology now. That's why there's so much more awareness of this blending of spirituality and healing. It's become sort of blended together a little bit, and there's a reason for it. In the Piscean age also, with the people who may have been really, really quiet or not spoken up in some lifetimes, they had to come in and say something. Because part of the problem is people hiding and not speaking up for what they need to speak up for, or not owning up to what they need to own up to. So sometimes you have to come in and maybe you had a family member that just kept tweaking you and tweaking you and tweaking you until you finally said, all right, I'll say what I need to say. And you don't have to be rude or nasty, but you might have to say something true or something real to you about that. So that's what the Piscean age has been about being aware of the old patterns. And unfortunately, in many cases, people have lived some of the old pattern in this lifetime. In case they don't believe in reincarnation, they have to relive it to remember that it's real. So if it would make it a lot easier if you just believed in reincarnation. But since most people in America didn't, you had to come in and re-experience a lot of this whatever your soul history may have been in the Piscean age, to become aware of it and say, oh, I was really a wimp. I never spoke up. Or I was really fearful, or I was really, really angry at all this stuff, or I felt really victimized. So you might have to have gone back and faced some of this stuff because there was no guarantee you were going to believe in reincarnation. So you had to come back, face it again, become aware of it. You had psychologists, therapists, support groups, books, websites all around you to help you become aware of something and work something out. And then once you become aware of it, you can get past it. And that's what I call mastering. I've seen more and more people master some situations psychologically and spiritually, emotionally, some issues that they've come in to heal. Some people have done a really, really amazing job, and they've gotten way past. I mean, they may have gotten past their issues and are not angry at people. They're not holding anybody else responsible. They're not hateful towards anybody. They're really calm and centered, and they're okay. And that's when you're at a point of mastery, is when you're pretty neutral. You're not a victim. Somebody else didn't mess you up your life. You're in a place where you're okay. So that's what the Piscean age has been about these clashes of power, the have and the have not, the powerful and the powerless, the love and the power, the misuse of love and misuse of power have clashed. The Aquarian age is going to be about we. It's going to be not about me. In this time, we had to develop a sense of self. So those of you who didn't have a strong sense of identity or a strong sense of your, we'll say your inherent, rights as a human being, you had to learn that. And you probably learned it real quick in the last 20 years. And the Aquarian age is going to be about we. You have to have an identity to be part of a we. You have to be somebody. You have to know that you have rights. You have to be whole when you're part of a we. So the Aquarian energy is a we energy. So it's not just, I'm going to worry about this other people. I'm going to care about these ladies in Afghanistan who were crushed by the Taliban and forced into prostitution. I'm going to care about other people in the world, whether it's my neighbor, whether it's people in foreign countries, whether it's people in my family. I'm going to care about other people. It's going to be there are more and more organizations now and more awareness of others. And of course, if you look at the internet, you look at the television, we're a global society now. We've become that in 20 years. We really are. I mean, it's not. If you go back to 1945 when Casey died, the only guys that went overseas were the military guys, and they went on their tour and they came back, or they didn't, but they went away. They were the only ones that went away. Most people, unless they were emigrating from a country to another country, did not go anyplace else except for where they were born. So now you can get on a plane. Half of you people probably got on a plane to get here. So we're in a different society where the Aquarian age is really about the we. It's about our whole society as a whole. If I use up all the water resources, if I took a shower for 2 hours and I use all the hot water in the house, nobody else is going to get a hot shower, right? So it's the same thing. If I use all the resources, other people kind of don't get the resources. So it's more about being aware of how are we all going to get a hot shower today. Okay, we're all going to take 10 minutes. Okay, that's how we're going to do this today. And so it has to do with our resources in the world. It has to do with our politics. It has to do with everything. The whole world is going to be more about we. And that's why tuning into other people is useful. The next level of consciousness is really a God consciousness. And it's going to be it's more of a perfect society. It's off in the distance a bit, but it's possible. But the God consciousness is a much higher consciousness. And I'll give you a subject to understand that from. Piscean age, if you look at a subject that was love. Love on the Piscean age was more personal love. I love you, love relationship, love, 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 books about love, stories about love, 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 love. All right. And then, and we all pay lots of money to go to the movies and see the stories and all that stuff. We just love love. Okay. And all of our problems, people come to psychics and go to therapists because love goes wrong. Love, love, love. Okay. So it's all personal love. So we have experiences with love. We fall in love. We fall out of love. We have more than one relationship in the 21st century. We have more than one relationship. We probably have had, we have different people in our lives we love. We realize this is a friendship love. This is a romantic love. This is a parental love. These are different kinds of love. So we experience all these different kinds of personal love. And without this level, you can't go to the next level. I noticed in the 90s, I started getting a lot of readings with what I call unconditional love. And it was, with personal love, it's a little bit more easy to accept the people. They're people you like. You can pretty much work with them. You might fall out of love with them, but okay. Or you were in love on Tuesday, you're not in love on Friday. Okay, that happens. So unconditional love's tougher in that it's maybe having a child that you absolutely adore, but they're a heroin addict. You love that kid, but you might have to do something that you don't want to do to help that child. And your nature will say, oh, I want to help this child. I want to take care of them. I want to fix it. I want them to come home and live with me. And unconditional love very often is kind of what you have to do, which they call it in that world tough love. But sometimes there's things you have to do under those conditions. Unconditional love can also be when you love somebody, but you know that they're not perfect, which is all of us. But it's an awareness of, it's easy to love somebody who's sort of similar to you. It's not that easy to love somebody who's really a little different. And it's, look at different households. Republicans marry Democrats. There's different people with different opinions, and there could be places that they don't really agree. So unconditional love means, yeah, that's a little quirky you got, but I love you anyway. So unconditional love can be the tougher stuff. Unconditional love is also through death. And through death, and we all lose loved ones. We've all gone through death experiences. And so you still love the person, but it's hard. It's not that it's hard to love them. You know you love them, but they're not here anymore. They're not physically there. You can't hug them. You can't take them to lunch. You can't talk to them about something. Not the way you did. You certainly can talk to them. You can certainly have dreams about them. They will connect with you very often. But unconditional love, it means a lot of times you love people, but it's a little less satisfying sometimes because you really don't get that personal satisfaction out of it that you would with the unconditional love. The radiant love is a higher society, and unconditional love, if we can learn, for example, I'll say in a country, in a situation like, say, us in Iran. I have a brother-in-law who's from Iran, and he's Persian. And in his case, it's like you learn to work with a country that you don't necessarily like. You say, we don't get you, we don't, but then say you find food you like together. You find some common ground. You can find something you like together. But as far as the unconditional love, you learn to work together for the good of the whole world. For loving everything, for loving the whole world, you say, we're going to work together because I don't agree with a lot of stuff you say. You're a little crazy dictator sometimes, but we're gonna work together because we've got to do it for the good of the whole world. That's our jobs. I'm the president, you're the president, we're going to be cool. So that's the job. The radiant love is more like Jesus. Jesus was known as this radiant being. You know how they always, all the pictures of the halos and stuff? That was the energy radiating out of him, but he also was a radiant being. He really became, I don't know if he was born one, but he became one anyway. But the radiant love, he was a very loving being. And loving would be that you're there for the person, you love everybody, and you love them all completely. I mean, that's, once again, it's a little idealistic. I'm just mentioning it so you see the whole scale. But that's where we're trying to go with some of this stuff. And I'll say another topic is the same thing. We'll talk about healing, since we talked about therapy and stuff like that. Personal healing usually implies something's busted. Something's wrong. Something's gone bad. You need to go see a therapist. You need to go to a doctor. Something's fragmented. So personal healing, I guess I should put an L. I should put an L on that. Personal healing is Personal healing is what God gave us a lot of opportunities to work with at the end of the 21st century, end of the 20th century, and the beginning of the 21st. So personal healing is, go to the doctor. You can get to the doctor. You can get to the therapist. You can find a chiropractor. You can find a hands-on healer. You can find somebody up here at ARE who can help you. You can find somebody down in town who can help you. Whatever your problem is, whether you need a urologist, whether you need a chiropractor, whether you need an osteopath, you can find somebody who can help you. It can be your physical body. It could be your spiritual body. It could be your emotional body. But whatever needs help, you can find the help. So it implies that something needs some attention. Something may have been fragmented, and you're going to fix it. The Aquarian Age, and that's what we've been doing. We've spent a couple decades doing this now. The Aquarian Age is really about wholeness. Whatever was difficult for you, whatever was a life lesson, whatever was painful, whatever was suffering for you, has actually made you whole or stronger. It's when you realize that. It's the realization that, yeah, I had some tough goes. I had to overcome a few things, but I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for that experience. Where you pretty much can say, it was really good that I got married too young, or it was really good that I had that dad who was really tough on me, or it's really good that I didn't get to go to school when I wanted to, and I dropped out because I was kind of being silly, and then I had to go earn my way back through school. Whatever your life story is, and there's lots of life stories out there, it's wholeness. And it's really where you say, whatever your wounds are, whatever your issues are, whatever your trauma is, there isn't a human alive that hasn't had some kind of suffering. I'd be shocked. If I found one that didn't, I'd be kind of surprised. And maybe they're different, I don't know. But they wouldn't need this lecture. In the wholeness area, it's where you realize everything that you become, everything that is about your life, everything about who you are, it's okay because you've healed it, you've addressed it, you know yourself really, really well, and you're basically at a place where you're okay with yourself. So whatever, sort of like looking at the lines on your face and going, yeah, I earned those. You can Botox them or not, but basically you earn them. And it's like, okay, I earned these things. I learned, and really, one of the things that I've done some readings lately to tap into what I should talk to you guys about. And one of the things that came up, and it was very strongly emphasized in the reading, was the only reason we are here is to become greater beings. And we have to overcome ourselves. So we spent, several thousand years, before the Piscean Age, I'm sure we were doing different things, but we spent at least 2,000 years having, issues that we're here to overcome. And now that we're overcoming these issues, we're also can tap into any soul talent from any century, from any era, or from any place that was not a physical life. Because your soul may have been doing things between lifetimes. So you don't know what it was up to. It may have been busy learning how to do something else. So you got your whole soul consciousness to tap into for talent. And then you have your human experience on earth as a soul in a body to become more powerful, to become stronger, to become more perfect. And only through, in my opinion, only through difficult experiences and circumstances that are challenging to us, sometimes that is one way that we learn to become more perfect. It's taking our flaws with us. And I do think that when we overcome our flaws and start working with them, and I've got plenty, I'll be working the rest of this life on mine. The wholeness issues are really, really where you become really extraordinary. That's your uniqueness. That's where your wisdom comes from. This is where wisdom is experienced. That's when you learn about the wisdom. Wisdom is that higher consciousness information. And the top one is holiness, which is once again, it's another perfect condition. I think the reason this came out this way also was that it was to show us that the world was capable of becoming perfect. Perfection was an option. Perfection is an option. Those are three of the main ones. I will say one of the other things I think down here on the lower level is religion, studying God, trying to experience God. Some people have done really, really well, having lots of lifetimes experiencing God. This can also be meditation and prayer. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to go through some. Religion does tend to divide, as you've noticed probably lately. The last one I'll talk about is creativity. Creativity can be singing, dancing, acting. It can also be being creative with the problem solving, being creative with a 4-year-old who's trying to find a way of getting out of going to bed, which we experience nightly. Okay. Well, it's joy, except the kid's not getting enough sleep. Okay. Okay, let me just go through these real quickly. There's other categories here, but just for the sake of argument. Religion, humans have come in to study God, so they invented religions. And we brought information down from higher places and learned about Buddhism, about Hinduism, about Christianity, about all kinds of stuff. And then people started really working with meditation and prayer as a way of tapping into God personally. Just for you, and it's always good to have a personal relationship with God, so meditation and prayer do that. The higher level, the 21st century level, the Aquarian age level, is awareness of God, of God constantly, a constant awareness of a higher power, a constantly feeling connected to higher power. One of the sufferings that humans go through that's really, really seems rough on them is the idea that they're alone. Is the idea that they've been abandoned by God. They do often feel that way. It's really not surprising to me because I feel it a lot in readings, where people do feel disconnected from spirit. They do. I do believe that's one of our big issues, our big journeys, is that disconnection from spirit has been a real painful experience for us. And when we reconnect, it's very, very, it's a very happy reunion. This is where God's will and human will sort of start connecting together. I'm from the Catholic tradition, so whenever I heard, oh, so-and-so's father died, oh, it was God's will, I was always like, ew. It seems a little rough. I don't know. In my opinion, it seemed a little, this all-loving God, oh, killed the dad. Okay, again. So it was a bit much for my brain to try to work with. But this is what I started realizing: God's will and human will can be the same will if we're tapped into it. We can understand what I have found, and the only good thing I'll say readings are for, the only thing I think readings are useful for, really, is looking at life from a spirit perspective, not a human perspective. If you look at it from life from a human perspective, it looks terrible. It just does not look good. There's a lot of suffering here. There's a lot of selfishness here. And they let a lot of the difficult souls back in. I mean, they let a lot of them back in. I don't know how long they're going to last, but they let a lot of really difficult souls back in. They're getting guns and shooting people at 7-Eleven. They don't just rob people anymore. They shoot them. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous, some of the stuff that's going on. So I think a few of them are having a little bit of a heyday. And I think a few of them are, hey, come on back in. See if you can turn your life around. Oh, okay, well, that one blew it. Oh, that one blew it. That one did too. So I think that there's a few that didn't quite make it. But if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, and that's what Kevin was talking about Friday night, and that's what I'm talking about, and that's what this awareness of God's will and human will being combined, is you realize, it's like the wholeness and the wisdom. You say, that's why I had that dad who was so rough on me. Because he really wanted me to learn discipline, because I really needed to learn discipline because I was going to need to really raise 3 kids by myself. And I'm going to need some discipline for that. So this is when you realize why things are the way they were, and you realize that God's will is really a loving will, and it's really, if you know yourself well, you know how the wills can work in correspondence to each other. But the spiritual perspective is much more comforting than the human perspective. And that's going to be the first exercise we're going to really, we'll get into a simple one, then we'll do a more complicated one. And then the higher level, the perfect level is oneness of God. And God and humans are one consciousness. We understand each other. And then creativity is down here. You guys may sew, you may, whatever you do with your creativity, that's just human creativity, television, film, all kinds of creativity. The spiritual level of the Aquarian Age is co-creating your life with God. Your life, you are co-creating it. It's not like something that you're a victim of, or you are stuck with this karma and you're going to die of tuberculosis at age 29 because you were only here to learn one little thing. It's co-creating your life. So these lives will be longer. They'll have more content to them. Used to be a life in the 1500s. Look at the plague, people. I mean, these people didn't last long, and they had some really rough conditions, and I'm not sure you want to live 90 years in parts of England in the 1500s. But as far as now, we can create a better society, so we can co-create the earth, we can co-create our society, we can create the world in a way that's helpful to everybody, not just to one small group of people. We can co-create, so that's what we're really here to do. And the higher level of that is all souls co-creating their life. The higher level is all souls find fulfillment. All souls. So it's all souls being creative. So that's what that comes down to, is all souls doing that, not just three, not just the special three. Okay. So that's just a rough snapshot of higher consciousness. And what we're going to do is a little exercise. And this exercise is going to be a simple view of your own past life. And the reason I like past lives, they give me information about where you left off. They give me information about talents that people have discovered. And what's interesting, and what's really interesting about this group in here, particularly people who consciously seek out development of their life, of their consciousness,